Hey guys, as promised, I have this video. I can't assure you that the video and the audio are going to sync up. My computer's running a little slow today, and like I said, I've been having trouble with these programs, so bear with me. Don't watch my face if it doesn't match up with my voice. Hopefully you can hear my voice correctly, and everything will be alright. As I told you in class, if you need Mr. Foltz to pause, just ask him and he will gladly hit the pause button for you to catch up. But keep in mind, you do have several slides to get through. So we're going to talk about the effects of the Industrial Revolution today. We've already mentioned some of them, and I'm sure you can think of urbanization and child labor off the top of your head, since those are the two things we've worked on the most recently. While you are watching, I want you to take Harvard notes. If you really are so anti-Harvard notes, that's okay. Please don't forget the summary. That's really one of the most important parts of note-taking for my class, is that you have some kind of summary at the end. I will check these on Monday when I return. This is review. We have several causes to the Industrial Revolution, among other things going on around the world. There are changes in agriculture, and these changes lead to an increase in population. We're talking about things like crop rotation, the enclosure movement, so creating mega farms that have higher production yields, the use of fertilizers, things like that. These are innovations or great changes that people are making that really lead to an increase in population because of the increase in food supply. We also have new inventions. The steam engine is one of these crucial inventions that really leads to a lot of other things, like the factory system. It makes production more efficient, and it really is a catalyst or a big cause of the Industrial Revolution. The factory system, again, the steam engine, the water frame, these large pieces of equipment that really increase product efficiency, creates the need for a factory and the mass production of goods. Hopefully you're recognizing some of these vocabulary words and you're able to make those connections over on our word wall. Then you have a new economic system, industrial capitalism, where people will use the capitalist model, so supply and demand, and they will use heavy industry in order to create new production methods. So key among them is an American, Henry Ford, who comes up with the concept of the assembly line much later. But even before that, you have new production methods that are really making a lot of money for people. In order to have a factory, or in order to be an industrial capitalist, you have to have several things. You have to have capital itself. We're talking about money either in the form of cash or equipment or some other kind of human capital, so intellectual ability. You have to have natural resources, which is going to lead to a whole nother issue, and we'll look at that later on with one of the effects of Industrial Revolution. Coal, farm goods, water, these are all really important things, and hopefully you saw that with your urbanization project too. And then you need a labor force. Women, children, immigrants provide this stable, cheap labor force. Hopefully you remember that as well. Here are several pictures. I want you to keep these images in mind. They're just sort of artistic watercolors of what the Industrial Revolution was really all about. You can see some of these innovations: factories, cars, electricity or telephone poles, large bridges, steamships, stuff like that. These are all industrial things. Here are effects. If you are one of those people who like to know what's coming before it happens, our effects are urbanization, a new class system, modern buildings and technology, poor wages and working conditions in the cities, an increase in child labor and illiteracy, and a need for new sources of raw materials. But we're going to talk about all of these individually, so my recommendation would be to write them one at a time as we get there. Urbanization is something we are familiar with. That's the process of moving from villages, being rural, to cities, being urban. So urbanization, making cities. Population increases, one, as a result of the enclosure movement that's kind of pushing people out of that open farmland, and two, the availability of jobs really helps. By 1850, half of England's population lived in cities, which is a dramatic change in where people were. London being one of these primary cities. Manchester, the city that you guys created the map of, is another one. This creates really poor living conditions, cramped housing, waste isn't really disposed of adequately. You've got a lot of people living in one small area, so they don't really think about these ahead of the time, which lead to disease, crime, and a lot of other just poor living conditions. Life expectancy actually decreases from 38 all the way down to 17 years old because of these things. So urbanization in this context is a really bad situation. I think a lot of you saw this in your effects of urbanization exit slip that I had you do. The one problem that you could see in the future, I saw transportation, I saw crowded space, I saw a lot of interesting things and commonalities that are listed here. Now we have a new class system as well. You saw this in some of your readings, but by this time in the Industrial Revolution, classes become based off of wealth, not necessarily heredity, so where you're born. You have this upper class, which are your factory owners. These are the people making the most money now. They're not your doctors, your lawyers, your merchants. Those people sort of move down a class into your middle class. They're still pretty well off, and they're still living a fairly nice life. They have nice houses and stuff like that. But the upper class is by far the most extravagant and wealthy. Then you have all the way at the other end, the working class. And the working class is a really big group, and it's a really poor off group. Okay? Your factory workers, mine workers, any kind of workers. There's little upward mobility, which means it's hard to go from the working class to the upper class. If you're working a job for 15 shillings a week, you really can't put things back unless you have some innovation or some extravagant invention. Then you really can't move up easily. Take a look at this picture. This is a lower class family. You can see their house, kind of take note of some of the things, the coal stove in the main living area. They're working from home. This is a one-room house. We would consider this a tenement, even though this is kind of a nicer one because it does have a window there. But just kind of look at the family, their clothes, their hair, their general appearance. And then take a look at this family. So around the same time period, another small family, but look at how they're dressed. Look at what they're doing in the picture. Look at kind of their attitude and demeanor. And this would be something of the upper class. So you can see that stark difference in what people kind of look like. As a result of this dense population, you get new housing developments called tenements. Tenements are long row houses that usually have poor lighting, poor ventilation, poor waste disposal. And these are generally near factories or mines so that all of these workers can just work all day long, go straight home, and not really have that long travel time. These are sometimes even built by factory owners in order to provide places for their workers. You also get a secularization of the city. So secular meaning non-religious. Instead of the church being the primary building within the city, you get city hall, stock exchanges, and then art buildings or recreational buildings like an opera house. This really changes how we view urban life as opposed to what people thought rural life was like. You have medical advances, vaccines, and x-rays that will eventually increase life expectancy, but it takes a while for that to happen. Just because of this stark difference and the working conditions that are so poor, life expectancy stays down for those in the bottom parts of society. And most efficiently or most significant is the advent of the light bulb. Electricity is now essential because now you can have light in every single house, so you need electricity in every single house. Cities start to invest a lot of money in infrastructure and putting in electricity everywhere, and people really start wanting it. Here's one of those tenements. You can see the long row house on one side and the long row house on the other side, and how crowded it is and how many families would have lived here. You can see all their laundry strung up in the middle. This is probably in a smaller city, just based on the spacing between them. Here's a bigger city. This is a New York or a Chicago type row house or tenement. You can see all of the different buildings, and this is even a little bit more modern. You've got the fire escapes and all these nice windows. The shop's down on the bottom floor, but still the same concept. A lot of people living in a really small space. Again, here, this is not so nice. Okay, you can see kind of the conditions here. This is probably an overcrowded area and a poorer part of town. But then on the contrast, you have these large public buildings. This is a train station, once a church, now turned into a train station, so a secular building now, even though at one point it held a religious purpose. And then one of the biggest buildings in England, this is Big Ben, okay, Parliament. This is a secular building, even though it kind of has that old town churchy feel. Another effect are poor wages and working conditions. Factories are often hot, crowded, dangerous, not well ventilated. Early on, there's hardly any lighting. You just have small windows. Once you get the light bulb, you can make these factories humongous and arguably make the conditions even worse. And then salaries were extremely low. I have a conversion rate here. 1 shilling equals about $2.22 of today's money. And so you can see kind of down at the bottom, men made 15 shillings per week, women 5, and children 1. I calculated that out into dollars per hour, and it's extremely poor for how long they were working per day. That's just to give you an idea of how bad wages really were, because I know you've seen the term very low a lot, but imagine working for 3 cents an hour, because you guys would be considered children. Here are some of those working conditions. You can see the people are very crowded. They're not mobile. They're sitting doing the same thing over and over all day long. Here's a larger, more industrial factory. Another one of these, how big they eventually would get. This is a factory as well. Here they're doing something agricultural, sorting potatoes or something like that. But you can see how many people there are. It's kind of dirty. It's kind of chaotic. There's not this like strict, clean thing that we would imagine in a factory. Child labor becomes essential for urban families to survive. Because of how low their income was, they just needed extra money, no matter how low it was. And so they would have their children work. Because the children were working, they were unable to attend school. And because social services really didn't exist at the time, you didn't really have health care either. So if you were injured, if you were underfed or malnourished, there was really no help for you. This is going to cause a lot of uproar in the future around the turn of the 20th century. Literacy rates drop all the way to 65%, which is awful. Britain actually ended up mandating a minimum time for people to be in school. You can see these children are working. These are a little bit older. They're rethreading looms. This is a power loom. You can see all of the thread down there. Young children working in the coal mines. Remember, we read that a lot of the people in the coal mines had to be really small so that they could fit into the mine. So children were the best fit there. These little guys, I don't know why, but I really love this picture. Barefoot, standing on the machine, rethreading the looms. No concern for the giant industrial belt near them. All of the little wires and sticks and all the little things that are poking out that could end up maiming this child. He doesn't really seem to have too much concern about that. One of the really, really big effects is that now that you can build things, or now that you can make a lot of things faster, You need raw materials. And in a place like England, a small island country, you have coal, which is extremely valuable, and you have iron, which is also important. But now, where do you get cotton? You need large fields to grow cotton. Where do you get these other raw materials that you need in order to create something valuable? So England has to search outside of the mother country in order to find things. And the best place to look is going to be colonies. They've had colonies before in the United States, or former United States. When we talked about the mercantilist system, this is really no different, except now they don't have that as a source of colonial possession. They need something else. So they look to Africa and Asia. And in the modern world, those are our colonial nations. The advanced machinery and weaponry of these European countries allows them to really take over these less organized parts of the world. This is not the only reason for imperialism. Please underline, circle, square this thing. It is really important that you know there are other reasons, and we're going to talk about those other reasons in our next discussion. But imperialism is something that's going to drastically affect our future, not just England, but the world's future. You can see in this map, every country that is colored is a colonial or an imperial nation. Okay, so whether if you see England up at the top, the little pink island in Europe, all of the other pink places are controlled by England. And the colors match up. France being the little purple one, all of those purple countries in Africa and Asia are controlled by France, and so on and so forth. This is something that really is striking when I look at it visually. Only certain parts of the world have control of themselves and don't really have colonies. You can see China, the Middle East, South America being among those. That's it. Hopefully you have Harvard notes done. At this point, you should be assigning main ideas in that left column, and then when you're done with that, kind of reflect on this. Create a summary of your notes. Why do we care about these effects? What does it lead to? And then I will see you Monday. Hopefully you have all this stuff done.